it's terrifying for companies, especially the company executives, with the personal liability that flows from it. And especially when it comes to the use of third-party business partners. Many companies don't have their arms around the business practices of their third-party business partners, and more of the enforcement trends that we see are around third-party business partners and their misconduct. The UK Bribery Act is very broad in its jurisdictional scope, which really puts the onus on companies that may have one place of business in the UK or have tangential business in the UK, really puts them on notice that they roll up under the UK Bribery Act. There are also a lot of questions around the UK Bribery Act and really what it means. The creation of a new criminal act for failing to prevent bribery with the only defense being adequate procedures is very nebulous, and companies are trying to get their arms around, do their current compliance programs measure up to adequate procedures, and what else do they need to include in their compliance program. I find that most companies, at least U.S. companies, to be in compliance with the FCPA, they all have their code of conducts. They all require employees to do annual training and, sign that they've received the code of conduct and that they're compliant with it. I think where companies fall down is really with respect to their third-party business partners. Many companies, I find, don't have even an inventory of who their third-party business partners are. They tend to know who their joint venture partners are, but beyond that, they don't have a good list of their distributors, sales agents, and vendors that they're using, let alone what those companies look like from a compliance standpoint. They're not doing the regulatory due diligence and reputational due diligence that they should be doing up front before they enter into a transaction with these companies, and then they're also not doing it on an ongoing compliance perspective. And with the recent enactment of the UK Bribery Act, this becomes that much more important. So the companies really need to have a handle around that, because any act of bribery committed by one of those parties can flow back through under the UK Bribery Act, and the company and its executives can ultimately be held responsible for that act, even if they had no knowledge of it and there was no authorization. Well, companies really need to be focused on how they're recording payments. The SEC is not going to accept that, we mistakenly misrecorded that in our books and records. They're viewing that as fraudulent. It's also, there have been recent cases where the SEC has gone after non-SEC registrants who have had some wrongdoing in conjunction with an SEC registrant. So that's really opened up companies' eyes to the fact that whether or not they're an SEC registrant, they need to really focus on the detail of how each and every transaction is being recorded in their general ledger, and they need to make sure that they're training their employees from the top down, because it's not just the CFOs, the controllers that need to be aware of what the rules are. It's the bookkeepers and the clerks who are making the actual debits and credits into the general ledger that need to understand the implications of each and every transaction that they record. I think this is just the beginning. I think with FCPA as well as with the recent enactment of the UK Bribery Act, I think we're going to see a wave of enforcement activities. I think it's going to spike. I think we're going to see a lot more individuals being held accountable, company executives. We're going to have big examples of that, sending a message to companies worldwide that corruption will not be tolerated. And I also think we're going to see an uptick in enforcement around third-party business partners. And that's really going to send a message to companies that they need to know who they're doing business with and what the business practices are.